Good afternoon. It's great to have you with us today. It's finally sunny and hopefully people have power. Next. My name is Kathy Leibowitz, and I serve as the current chair of the RAC Communications Subcommittee. On behalf of our colleagues on the subcommittee, welcome to our first RAN of 2023. Next. We have a few notes as we get started. We are recording the meeting. The presentation and slides will be posted online. This is a Zoom webinar and you are in watch mode. Chat is disabled, but please use the Q&A feature to submit questions and we will do our best to answer them during the meeting. Live captioning is available. We acknowledge that the university is located on the territory of the Anishinaabe people. We also acknowledge the sovereignty of tribal lands, and we reaffirm contemporary and ancestral Anishinaabe ties to this land, as well as the profound contributions of Native Americans to this institution. Next. So our agenda for today, the RAC Communications RAN Planning Group has put together a great program today. We have a panel discussion on demystifying the CRA process, a RAC update and reminders, as well as updates from our central offices. Next. Community kudos. We would like to take a moment to recognize the more than 100 volunteers who make RAC a reality. You may have seen the impressive and extensive list of names during the opening slide carousel. We will share them via chat during the meeting, and again with the meeting materials that will be posted on the RAN webpage after the meeting. To all the RAC volunteers, thank you. Your efforts are noted and appreciated. And if you saw someone you knew on the list, or maybe you didn't know they were on the list, reach out to your colleagues and give them a shout out to recognize their volunteer efforts. Next. So some things that are coming up. We have planning underway for our next 2 virtual networking sessions, where we will host a virtual meet and greet with sponsored programs on March 15th and ORSP in April. That date is still to be determined. Jamboards are coming online soon, so please submit your questions. We have more 21 questions in store on Slack, both individual interviews and general posts to the whole RA community to generate dialogue and engagement. So we hope that you will participate and enjoy the process. Next. Before we get started with our introductions of our guest MC, we want to understand a little bit about your familiarity with the Certified Research Administrator, CRA designation. So we're going to have a quick poll. Please select all of the options that apply to you. And those are, I have obtained my CRA and my certification is active. I have obtained my CRA, but my certification has lapsed. I am planning to sit for the CRA exam in the next 12 months. I am interested in learning more about the CRA. I have no intention of pursuing my CRA at this time. So we're going to give you about a minute to gather those responses. Should have asked Chris to play some music during the poll. Next time, we'll do that next time. Okay, I think we have most of the responses in, and we have about 15% who responded have their CRA, so we're interested in making those connections. And we have 9% or so that are planning to sit within the next 12 months, and 33% are interested right now in learning more. So we can move on to the introductions. So without further ado, we are delighted to introduce our colleague, Danielle Smith, who is the Director for Research Administration at the U of M Life Sciences Institute, and who has graciously agreed to serve as our MC today. In her more than 23 years in research administration, Danielle has spent the last 8 or so at U of M since 2015, and previously held positions at Harvard, Smith College, UMass Amherst, and Northeastern, and they've each added to her story. Danielle serves as the LSI representative to the Research Administration Advisory Council, RAC, and Smaller Schools and Colleges Research Administration Group, SCRAG. A co-creator of U of M's Aim Higher CRA study program, she currently serves as a moderator and advisor, and she is also a mentor to several RAs here and in New England, and she is also a certified research administrator. Danielle has been a member of NCURA since 2008, including Regions 1 and 4. She currently serves on the Region 4 Awards Committee and is also a member of SRA. Outside of work, and I don't know when she has time, Danielle enjoys nature photography and writing. And now over to you, Danielle.
Thank you so much, Kathy, and thank you to the committee for inviting me to be your guest MC this afternoon. So very early on in my research administration career, when I worked at a different university and at a small center, I was approached by sponsored programs to apply for a position with one of their teams. And just some backstory, I'd spent quite a bit of time in their offices as I worked through a number of issues in the portfolio that I managed. The position that I had entered at that time had been vacant for several months. And so I got to know folks there quite well. And my first interview for this position was then with Associate Director Tony Lee. And again, I knew him somewhat from my visits, and we chatted about mutual interests such as writing and books. And I walked into the interview and I was all prepared for those typical interview questions, such as, tell us about yourself, your experience, and your transitions, etc. And Tony surprised me. He said in his British accent, which I will not attempt today, "Now, Danielle, I think you would like working here. We have a great cast of characters. Our plot twists are quite interesting and often surprising. We deal with a bit of conflict from time to time. It would make a great chapter in your story." And I think it's safe to say that Tony was talking about my research administration story and not my interest in writing. And fast forward a few chapters later, although interesting, I was working at a different university and I was contemplating a change of some sort. I didn't want to leave my position because I liked it there, but I felt like I was growing a bit complacent and I wanted to challenge myself in some way. And I came across the Certified Research Administrator, or CRA. And this wasn't widely popular in New England. In fact, pursuing your master's was a more popular choice, and that's really great too. However, I saw the CRA as an opportunity not only to rewrite my RA story, but to continuously rewrite it. And it shifted my perspective about my career, and it continues to provide me with opportunities for learning and growth even today. So what is the CRA and who is responsible for issuing that designation? So the Research Administrators Certification Council, RAC, was formed in 1993. And this is an external nonprofit organization. Please do not confuse this with RAC, which is an internal organization, also super great, by the way. And the RAC is comprised of certified research administrators who are very interested in helping others achieve proficiency in the research administration field. And to be a CRA, it means that you, through your experience in testing, have the fundamental knowledge to be a professional research administrator. And it's achieved through an exam, which is based on the body of knowledge, which covers the broad spectrum of research administration, think a mile wide and an inch deep. There are requirements for the exam, and you must have at least 3 years of research administration experience. And with the 3 years, a bachelor's or an advanced degree. If you have 5 years, you can have at least an associate's. If you have 6 years and no degree, that requires a special waiver, but I would encourage you to check that out well ahead of time in order to be able to submit what's necessary for that. So next slide, please. The exam itself is 250 multiple choice questions. You have to get 175 questions correct to pass. And the questions are made up of questions that are submitted by other certified research administrators. And the total testing time is 4 hours from the time that you hit the button until the time the exam is finished. The clock does not stop. So at this time, we are going to welcome our guest panel. My colleagues here, I'm going to introduce. First up is Stephanie Blackmore, and Stephanie is currently a research administrative process lead at LSA Finance. She has been with the University of Michigan for 10 years this April, where she started at ULAM as an associate accountant. She passed her CRA exam 5 years ago and is now a graduate student at City University of New York, CUNY, pursuing a Master's of Science in Research Administration and Compliance, and she's nearly halfway through the program. Next up is Karina Burkhardt. Karina is part of the LSA Finance team that supports chemistry and biophysics. She has been with U of M for 4.5 years and started working in research administration over 10 years ago. She is originally from Germany, and she has lived in 5 US states so far. In her free time, she loves volunteering with the PTO at her son's school and reading. Fred Paffhausen is up next. Fred is currently a pre-award research administrator in the Division of Gastroenterology and Hepatology in the Department of Internal Medicine. As a pre-award research administrator, he helps find, prepare, and submit funding applications. He has 2 degrees from U of M Dearborn, and before he came back to U of M as an employee, he had a varied career as a political campaign staffer, a grant writer, and research editor. When he's not at work, he enjoys baking, board games, good food, and reading. Nick Prier is up next, and Nick is a research administrator, senior manager in the Survey Research Center at the Institute for Social Research, where he has worked for over 20 years in research administration across several programs and units at the Institute. In his spare time, Nick is a part-time bartender, which he's been doing for 20 years as well. And he loves baking and traveling, especially to Mackinac Island during the summer. So welcome to the panel. And we have some questions for you. So first up is for a question for Fred. So Fred, what are some of the things that RAs who are interested in obtaining their CRA should think about before they decide to take the exam? And what are some of the resources that you used, either from the RAC, U of M, or other sources to help you prepare?
Well, the first thing you need to think about is your schedule at work and outside of work. Ask yourself, do I have the time that this is going to take to study? Because you're going to need to study. Ideally, in organized things like Aim Higher from U of M or Virginia Tech's CRA study team. Those of you studying for your CRA will hear this a lot, but most folks who pass spend around 30 hours studying outside of those organized study groups. And that's about how much I spent, but you don't want to do what I did. GI Hep, especially on pre-award, is very busy. I had a dozen different proposal deadlines in the month before I sat for my exam. I didn't really have time to start my outside studying until the Tuesday afternoon before I sat for it. I crammed 30 hours of studying on top of my regular workload in 3.5 days. I do not recommend that. In terms of resources, it's like studying for any other test. You need to find what works for you and for your brain. I know some folks like the virtual flashcards from an app called Quizlet. I couldn't get a hang of the app, and virtual flashcards just did not click with my brain. Two things that I found to be a great use of my time and recommend highly are the official CRA body of knowledge review sessions and the official practice test. The review sessions are a Zoom meeting with 200 plus PowerPoint slides in the deck, where two CRA instructors walk you through the body of knowledge and cover the highlights and the sorts of topics that are likely to be on the test. The full body of knowledge is massive, but the test only wants that surface layer of detail. And the review sessions give you a great idea of the sorts of topics that you're likely to see. I suggest 2 half-day sessions if you can, otherwise it's a very long day. Oh, and even though they're virtual events, they close registration a few weeks early. I found that one out the hard way. You get sent the nice slide deck a few days before. I printed mine and took notes. Then I went through and made paper flashcards with the key points from the slides and my notes, making sure to focus on everything I knew I didn't know. The pile of flashcards then got winnowed down as I studied. The last couple of cards were actually the last things I reviewed before I got on my car and walked in to take the test. The practice test looks exactly like the real test. You've got 75 multiple choice questions, and it's a great orientation to how the test software works, how the questions are going to be worded, just the entire process of what it's like. And at the end, you get your score broken down by the same body of knowledge categories that the actual test is scored on, so you know what you have to focus on. I found Virginia Tech study team's session recordings to be really helpful. I actually binged them all at 1.5 speed when I finally had time to study. I even rewatched a couple of them because I knew I needed that extra bit of review of the topic. Aim Higher was incredibly useful, and that was a key part of my weekly study, even when it was my only studying that week. And 2 last things. One, for those of us who are not good at waiting, they email you the test results 4 to 6 weeks after the close of the exam window. So if you sit at the start of the exam window, your wait's a little longer than the folks who go at the last day. And take time off after the test if you can. I sat for mine on a Saturday morning and I still felt mentally exhausted come Monday. As for me, I am a testament that studying works. I would have passed just off of the practice test, which was the first thing I took when I started studying. I had a nice gentleman's C, but I binged my studying and did 17 points better. So studying works. You just need to make the time.
Thank you so much, Fred. That was really, really helpful. So the next question goes out to Karina. Karina, can you share some information about the U of M Aim Higher study group and some of the particulars that the group provides?
Yeah, sure. So Aim Higher, as Danielle has mentioned, was started here at U of M by Danielle herself and Sue Kelch, who has since retired. And I'm very happy to be on the team now together with Stephanie and also Melissa Lee from the med school who couldn't be here today. Aim Higher runs twice a year. And that's because the testing window with RAC is twice a year as well. The exams take place in May and in November in each year. So for about 8 weeks before the testing window, we have moderated sessions for our participants to prepare for the exam. And those sessions go over the major topics of the body of knowledge. We also provide sample quizzes in each session so that the participants are prepared how to read the questions carefully, how the multiple choice layout looks like, and that there aren't too many surprises with the format during the actual exam. The sessions are moderated by CRA, some of them recently certified. It's a great way to earn contact hours. We also have other topic experts joining us so that we really can offer our participants a broad overview of everything that is going to happen on the test. And the CRAs like to give some tips and tricks about the test taking. More of that also happens during an introductory meeting and a review session that frame those moderated body of knowledge learning sessions. Our introductory meeting this season is actually this upcoming Friday on March 3rd. And we are going to, in these introductory sessions, invite traditionally recently certified CRAs to talk about their experience. We talk to the participants about tips and tricks when it comes to test taking and exam prep. We guide them through the registration with RAC and offer to help with anything that they come across during the initial phase of preparing for the exam. We also collaborate with Virginia Tech that Fred just mentioned. They have a long-standing and good program, and we want to do that because we want to offer the participants some additional study tools like the moderated, in addition to the moderated sessions that we do. Virginia Tech has recorded webinars. We also collaborate with Virginia Tech on the resource called CRA A Day, where during basically the full 8 weeks before the exam window, we send out a handout daily with topics that the test takers can focus on for that day. The difference between Virginia Tech and us is that Virginia Tech has recorded webinars, and we here at Aim Higher keep it a little more personal. We have a smaller cohort. We have interactive Zoom meetings so that our participants feel very comfortable asking questions and have conversations about anything that might come up. We are open to anyone at U of M and beyond. There's no cost for Aim Higher. I do want to mention that there is a test fee for taking the exam with RAC. But again, it's free of charge to join the test prep group here at U of M. The main goal of Aim Higher is we are here to help everybody who wants to take the exam to be prepared in a community. We want to provide the participants with the personal connections to other people studying, and to us. We're always open for questions. And we have had so far really great experience with having successful participants come out of the study group, taking the CRA exam, and then actually coming back to moderate sessions at one of the next cohorts.
Excellent, Karina. Thank you so much. What a great resource for folks on campus. So the next question goes out to Nick. Nick, you have been involved with the Aim Higher study group as well as being a Navigate trainer. What are some of the ways that Aim Higher is similar or different to what might be offered in a typical training course like the one offered through Navigate?
Thanks, Danielle, and thanks for all my fellow panelists today to talk a little bit about the CRA and Aim Higher a little bit. So we often like to say that the CRA is a lot like a pond. There's an awful lot of breadth, but there's not as much depth. And that's something that I think is really important to remember. Aim Higher, like Karina talked about, is a comprehensive study group that provides a huge amount of breadth related to specific topics each week. And all those topics normally fall into specific buckets of knowledge that are like metriced and needed out for the exam you're going to take. So I find it to be a very 30,000-foot view of many things you'll need to know for the exam. And it covers a huge variety of topics. And the nice part is many of them are topics that RAs might not be dealing with on a daily basis. So you're a post-award administrator, you're going to cover pre-award and vice versa. Human subjects, a lot of people don't deal with it. Animal studies, I don't do it at all. I don't even know what it is. General accounting, depending what you're doing, maybe that's not in your wheelhouse. Biohazard management, the list goes on. Many of Navigate's courses, for example, budgeting basics or the UG monitoring course, they will supplement information that may be included in the overall CRA. However, a couple things to remember, like, first of all, it's very University of Michigan focused, those Navigate courses, where the overall CRA is much more like as a whole at any institution. Sometimes those answers can be different depending where you are, but the answer on the CRA is, doesn't matter what institution, what is the correct answer. And also remember, like the pond reference, I like to go back to that. The Navigate courses provide an awful lot of depth on one or similar topics, where Aim Higher is much more related to specific items on the exam with a limited amount of depth, as it's not necessarily needed for many of the topics at hand. I don't need a 2-day training course on, let's say, biohazard management when there's going to be one question on the exam. So.
Great. Thank you so much, Nick. That's it's very insightful. Stephanie, the next question is for you. What, if any, are the requirements for being in good standing as someone with a current CRA designation? And what are some of the things that apply toward contact hours for current CRA designees?
Thank you, Danielle. Well, after getting your CRA and going through all this work, what's the next step? So recently we started the CRA Victors, which is a program for University of Michigan. And basically anytime anyone passes the CRA, you automatically get signed up for the CRA Victors, which you can participate. Hopefully you'll choose to or not. But those CRA Victors will answer some of those questions. So how do you stay in good standing? The number one is giving back to the research administrative community. Most of that is through contact hours, which you can moderate an aim higher class. That's one way. Work as an ethical example for others and uphold the integrity of research administration, which you should have an in-depth knowledge once you pass your CRA exam. I regularly check on the RACC website for any changes, which there have been current changes to the recertification process and what requires recertification. Another one is ensure that your contact information is up to date in the RACC system. That is the information they'll use to contact you. They do email you when it's time for you to recertify or any other kind of information they need to send to you. Also be aware and prepared for costs for recertification. There's cost to get the certification, and then there's always cost for recertifying as well. The other number one is continuously work on your contact hours throughout the term. Don't wait till the last minute and track everything as you earn them. That would make it much easier than waiting till the last minute. There's tons of things that you can do that apply for contact hours. There's many internal U of M options, which are found on the ORSP website. The CRA Victors formed a little committee and we put together a table, which I believe we'll share that or the link to that after our session. You can teach on aim higher class, as we've been talking about. You can participate in a CRA committee or group project. Participating in RAMP or other RAC activities, RAAC within the University of Michigan. If you participate in RAMP, it counts if you are a mentor or a mentee. Looking and participating in webinars through SRAI, NACURA, other professional memberships, NIH, NSF. I know there's a lot of options there. Also go to professional membership meetings and be an active member. I've been a member of SRAI and recently started looking more into NACURA. You can also write RA-related articles for professional organizations like SRAI, and you can attend classes or complete a graduate level certification program in research administration. Like CUNY, I know there's a couple different options. There's, I believe there's one with Florida, Michigan State. And then if you have an idea or you're going to participate in something and you're not sure if it counts as a contact hour, RACC, RACC, I feel like I have to make sure everyone understands which RAC I'm talking about. RACC has a general email that you can email them questions on that information. So you can be sure.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Stephanie. Okay, so we have one final question for all of our panelists. Can you give us the number one reason why you decided to obtain your CRA? And we're going to start with Fred.
I'm a nerd, so I really enjoyed the intellectual challenge. You learn so much that you didn't know. The body of knowledge itself is 8 pages of bullet points grouped into 4 broad topic areas. When you study, you'll learn about things that you work with every day, but you never really knew how they worked. Until I started studying, for instance, I just assumed that IRB and IACUC approvals were email the PI or somebody in their lab and ding, I've got a hum number or a pro in my inbox. There's more to it than that, but we don't, as RAs at U of M, deal with having to, submit the IRB application or submit the IACUC application, or really have a good sense of who sits on the IRB or the IACUC and the membership composition and all of that, which is great exam question fodder. Hint, hint for those of you studying. And it's really just, in a weird way, it was fun to learn how much I didn't know, and then to fill in some of those gaps.
Great, thank you, Fred. Next, we'll go to Karina.
So I think my answer would be basically because I love my job. It's this taking the CRA and preparing for it, doing all the studying really lets you dive into the breadth, not as Nick said, the depths of everything research administratively related. And I found I just found I learned a lot of new things that I didn't know about. Also, like Fred said, sometimes you work with something, but you don't know the background, and it's very interesting to widen your horizon, and just have that background knowledge when you go into something that you see maybe every day, maybe once in a while. Maybe you learn about something that you would never touch. For example, I don't do audits, but I felt better knowing about what the process looks like and how it works as just part of the background knowledge of my job. So I would say studying for the CRA and then taking the exam, being a CRA opens doors for your professional development, for you personally, just to feel more secure with the knowledge that you bring to your job. And it's a good community. So I like being a CRA. I can only recommend it.
Thank you, Karina. Next, we're going to go over to Nick.
All right, I'm going to be a little more practical here on this. So personally, I have a bachelor's degree, and I was really thinking at one point about going back to get my master's degree. As an adult learner, so to speak, I was interested to see if I was truly ready to go back to school. And when I decided to take it, I thought it would be a really good segue to see if I was ready to actually go back and get an advanced degree. Not only is it a really great way to continue your overall education, but it also possibly gives you a jumping off point if you're interested in going any further along in your educational journey. So not only for all the great reasons that my friends are talking about on this panel, I think there's a practical one, which is, are you ready to go back to school? And for me, it was maybe, which I don't know if that's a good answer or not.
It's a great answer, Nick. Thank you. And Stephanie, over to you.
I actually had the same thing as Nick, where I wanted to see if I was ready to go for my master's, and mine was a yes. I am in the master's program, and I do find that it's helpful in different ways that the CRA didn't prepare me. I think the biggest reason for me, why I love having my CRA, is confidence. When you have knowledge, I feel like you have confidence. You know what you're doing, you know what you should be doing and why. That was the biggest thing. I feel like I always want to know the why. And that is to me, that's just a big confidence boost when you do understand.
Great. Thank you, Stephanie. So we do have another question that came through. How much on-the-job training would you recommend before taking the CRA exam? Why don't we start in the same order? Fred, do you want to take a stab at that first?
I mean, I took the CRA as soon as I was eligible, 3 years plus a graduate degree in research administration, but I'd been writing non-research grants for local governments and foundations for almost 5 years before I came to U of M. Certainly, it all depends on how wide your skill and exposure of what you have is, because the more experience you have had going into the exam, the more items you can say, well, I've at least heard of this, or okay, I know vaguely what that is. So it helps winnow your studying down to the things that you're truly going, I have literally no idea what this is, and I've never heard this word in my life.
Thanks, Fred. And next we will go over to Nick.
I will be honest, I was much further along in my research administration career when I decided to take the CRA. I've had it for 4 years. 4 years? That sounds right before the pandemic I got it. And I do, and I'll be even more honest, I am a life cycle administrator, pre, post, and everything in between. And I will tell you, it was extremely helpful because there were, I'm just going to say it because I feel like it's a really safe place to say it. Like there were entire sections of items in the CRA I never studied. I do pre-award every day. I do NIH grants and lots of others every day. I never cracked a book or even looked at pre-award in any way and easily passed that entire section. So I would say a couple years in, at least, knowing your own job, how it relates to U of M and what it looks like, I think could be helpful. But also I think you could probably study enough and you wouldn't get bogged down where I did by the how does this work at U of M as opposed to how does this work just in general, which I know I got questions wrong because when I answered them, it was what does U of M do? And that wasn't the question. It's how does this work, you know, in general. So I think it depends. I think as long as you're a good learner, a good student, I think you could probably study and take it fairly easily. But if you're a little further along in your research administration career, it's only going to help you.
Agreed. It's over to Stephanie.
I think it's person dependent. I think that you can't have, you know, a certain amount of hours will be different for everybody. I agree that I guess one of the things that I did remember hearing is that some people have made the mistake that even though because they've been in research administration for years, they felt they didn't need to study and would go in and take the test and then fail. And that's not the best way to go in it. I think what Nick said was perfect, where you can only get better, you can only learn no matter how long you've been in it. So I think it's good to know that it just depends. It depends on the person.
Okay. And just to make mention too, on the number of times that you can take the exam, you can take it as many times as you need to, so long as you submit an application in the fee. There is no limit. So thank you so much. I don't see that we have any other questions in the chat or in the Q&A. So thank you very much to Stephanie, Karina, Fred, and Nick. We all appreciate your experiences and your insights in both the CRA and into the AIM Higher Study Program. So thank you for joining us today. So I'd like to say, thank you. I'd like to say, so let's see, and now to maintain your credentials, as was mentioned by Stephanie in terms of maintaining your credentials, there's two paths you can take. You can certainly retake the rigorous 4-hour exam again, and you pay the fee and you submit an application, or you can submit what they call a recertification application. And with this, you're going to want to submit a detailed transcript of your contact hours. So those are your professional development or research activities. There is a cost to that, but you'll want to start tracking from the moment that you pass the exam. And there's some tools for doing that, and we can provide that as resources as well. If you're currently a CRA like I am, the 5-year term applies for your current recertification and 80 contact hours. And after that, you'll be on the 3-year plan with 42 contact hours. So we posed a question to all of the certified research administrators on campus, and there's over 80 of them now, and what the CRA means to you. And you can see from this cloud, this word cloud, that it really means something different for everyone. But there's a special emphasis on knowledge, professionalism, and expertise. So I like to say, and you can see by this cloud, that it's after the CRA exam that the fun really begins. As I mentioned earlier, the CRA provided me with a great opportunity to rewrite my RA story. And from the time I started studying for it, my career changed. I created and led the CRA study program at Northeastern. I received my certification and had even more opportunities on the way to recertification. The first time, I'm recertifying for a second time coming up. And it was through these professional development and research activities. So when I came to U of M, I had the opportunity to collaborate with Sue Kelch and others in creating the AIM Higher Study Program. We've helped other universities start their own study groups, from leadership opportunities to serving on committees, co-writing an article, leading discussion groups, attending conferences. My network has grown tremendously. I have connections with research administrators from across the country and from other nations. This is my RA story, and you've heard from your colleagues a bit of theirs. And there are many paths to take as a research administrator. And I hope today gives you an opportunity to reflect on your own story. So we're going to leave you with one final question. What does your next chapter look like? Now over to Chris.
Thanks, Danielle, and really appreciate that panel presentation. Thanks to all of our guests. I know as we were planning it, we had a lot more information that we wanted to provide to all of you. So that is something we're planning to put together. I know there was mention of resources and different links. We're actually compiling that. We were hoping to have it together today, but as I sat and looked at it, I think there's actually more that we want to put into there, into that resource document. So we will be circulating that after the fact for this meeting. So, and we'll be sure to share that via our RA forum on Slack, which I'll talk a little bit about in a few slides. So a few updates related to RAC. You may recall, if you were in attendance at our October 22 or our 2022 meeting, that we conducted a survey of all RAs who are interested in responding. That survey was comprehensive in that it covered all of the RAC subcommittees and the DEI work group. We did open that survey from November, or during 4 weeks, excuse me, in November and December. We were pleased to have 98 responses to the survey. The results are something that each of the respective subcommittees are currently working through. There is going to be a need to do some secondary analysis. We did make it so that the survey could be completely anonymous if somebody wanted to, but those respondents who provided their unit, we are going to take a look at that because there may be some unit specific either training or resource or just knowledge awareness opportunities there. So more to come on that. A brief update from the RAC DEI work group, which we usually present at this meeting. We did send a newsletter, and hopefully most of you received that either by participation in RAC or from colleagues who are part of a RAC subcommittee, focused on Black History Month events and resources. We are in the last day of Black History Month, but if those resources or that information is useful year-round to you, which we feel it is, the link is in this slide. So when we send out the materials after, you'll be able to link directly to that newsletter, as well as some of the resources and events that we've shared. We partnered with Sponsored Programs to host a current events water cooler session. I owe a huge debt of gratitude to Chris Becken in Sponsored Programs, who has really helped move a lot of the Sponsored Programs DEI work forward. We have sort of informal conversations with Sponsored Programs staff periodically throughout the year, and we decided to branch out and include the RAC DEI work group and the RAC subcommittees in that as well. And we have every intent of continuing that. One thing that came out of that I wanted to be especially mindful of and make you all aware of, if you weren't already, is that current events impact all of us in different ways. And it's always, I think, and as we've been seeing in our work, it's always a good idea to step back and check in with colleagues in your teams and those who report to you. Even just having that time to sort of say, I'm not having a good day, might be something that someone needs, so that at least they know it's okay to not be okay, and someone can maybe help work through that with them. So just a reminder that those events do impact folks in different ways. The RAC subcommittee chairs, I did want to provide this update because I don't know that we've given this update at a RAN meeting previously. The RAC subcommittee chairs have been meeting monthly since early 2022. And that's really a way for us as chairs and myself to look for ways that we can share information and collaborate across RAC subcommittees. And one of the things that we are keenly aware of, and this probably is no surprise to a lot of you, especially with increased workloads and even reduced staffing levels in a lot of units across campus, we do want to make sure that folks have an opportunity to assess their participation in RAC, and also to kind of help make sure that we are continually having a way to check in with RAC members to make sure that it's still a commitment that they have the time and bandwidth to do. And so one of the things we're currently brainstorming, but one of the things is with the RAC chairs, we're looking at ways to improve the membership and succession processes within RAC. And that's for a lot of reasons, to open up opportunities to more folks, to maybe have a better way of the succession planning and more sort of things in place, so we're not sort of reactive, we're a little bit more proactive when it comes to succession. More on that to come. Again, we're brainstorming, but this is something that all of the chairs are in agreement on, that we should take a look and perhaps improve those processes. I did want to mention, no need to take down all this information because we will be sharing this after the meeting. But as Kathy mentioned, we will be having a virtual networking session on March 15th, where we'll be welcoming guests from sponsored programs. There is a link to the Jamboard in here and in this slide, and we will again be circulating this after the meeting. A reminder that applications are due for the Navigate Uniform Guidance Cost Principles class on April 5th, and that's a 2-day virtual instructor-led course that runs on April 18th and April 25th. We're still, as Kathy mentioned at the outset, we are looking to have another virtual networking session in April, this time welcoming guests from ORSP. We're still working with them on an exact date and time, but we will be sure to communicate that as it is finalized. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is May 17th will be our May RAN meeting, and we're looking forward to seeing you all there. The last thing I'll say is that we want to remind you all about the RA Forum on Slack. We continue to grow the numbers of members on that channel. And there are a lot of different things that come through, including just regular announcements about policy changes, about other things that may be happening, job postings, sharing resources and best practices, and just kind of getting to know other RAs. And there's also a lot more on there, including that is a way that we found for some of the RAC committees, it's good for us to sort of use that forum to get ideas for how we can improve things. So please remember to post on Slack, to check on Slack. We're really working to try to bolster that communication channel. That's all I have for the RAC update. And so at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Carolyn Pappas for the ITS update. Carolyn?
All right. Thank you, Chris. I'm going to go over a couple of changes that we put in the system actually yesterday morning. So some of you may have already encountered these. So let me go over this list first, and then I have slides for many of these items. We made some changes to the PATH form that was related to the new NSF policy for off-campus research. We added in to our compliance status meter on award and modifications, automatic checking of M-Inform disclosures for investigators. And then in tandem with that, we improved some of the emails that are sent to the project team when your award or your modification goes on compliance hold, really to provide you with more detailed information on why is that project on a compliance hold. So hopefully that clears up some confusion that people had over the last few years. We've updated the list of PI job codes in ERPM. And we made a change to a tab on the award and the award change request. This is a tab called mod/ACR. And we've added some new displays there so you can see the documents and open them up from there, as opposed to having to click around in the system to find them. And I have screens for those. I have slides for those. And then the last one, I don't have a slide for, just to let you know, if you are a person who does SF424 system to system submissions, We've updated the congressional districts, and we've also updated the Cognizant official name, which gets mapped into a couple of the budget forms. So if you could move to the next slide. And Andrea, do you want to pop on the camera here? I'm going to go over the system pieces, but the bigger piece of this is the NSF policy that's behind it. So in the system, we've added a new validation rule. And if you're answering question 1.8, which is the class code, and you select off-campus research, you will get a validation error. If you could click the next slide, please. That tells you under the space section for U of M investigators, the general space section, you have to answer question 4.4 yes, because the proposal, the class code is now off-campus research. If you could go to the next slide too. The other piece of this is if you have question 4.4 answered yes, 4.41 shows up as it did before. Underneath that, there's text about the National Science Foundation policy, which requires you to upload the Safe and Inclusive Working Environment Plan. And Andrea, do you want to say something about the policy at this point?
Sure, just so people have some context.
Yeah.
This will be covered in more detail in my slides, but I'll go over the content now and you can have the written documentation in the slides for later. Basically, the NSF came out with a new requirement. They announced it, I think in November of last year, that they were going to start requiring institutions to have in place at time of proposal submission a plan for a safe and inclusive work environment for any proposals that contained off-site or off-campus work. And this requirement meant that the plan had to be in place at the institution, and our office, as the authorized signers for the institution, would be certifying that that is actually complete and ready to go at time of proposal submission as part of our certification statements to NSF. So part of what we did is the upgrades to ERPM to capture that plan has actually been put in place, and to notify the units as they're completing their path that is going to be a requirement if they are working with NSF and have offsite work, which is why we're leveraging some of these space sections right now. And I'll go into a little more detail when we get into my slides later.
Okay, thank you. And I may ask you to jump in on one other slide in a few slides on the PI eligibility. So then this is the last piece of it. For unit approvers, when you're running the activity on the path to approve a path, and you're part of the administrative home chain, you're going to see the new text on the bottom that says offsite, which references this plan. And so essentially you're certified in ERPM that you are aware of it. Next slide, please. The M-Inform disclosures. So this was something that was manually checked before, and we've now moved it into an automatic check into the compliance status. So if you have an M-Inform, an investigator with an invalid M-Inform disclosure, it's going to show up as red here. And then once that person goes in and discloses, in fact, all people in the investigator set disclose, it will turn to green. So if it is red, it is going to be put on compliance hold until all investigators have a valid disclosure. So again, no real change to business policy, just a system change. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we've updated the emails that are sent when it's in compliance hold. So they're now specific to whatever compliance hold item or items are marked in the compliance hold status box. So in this one, in particular here, it indicates that the person does not have, or at least one person does not have a current disclosure on file in M-Inform. And then there are some job aids as well as links to a job aid on the ORSP website that has a lot of detail about what the factor is and how to get it released. This next slide, I'm going to have Andrea speak on as well. We made some changes in the system based on a business policy. So if you are a PI who has one of the new LEO library archivist or curator job codes, This will no longer require a justification and approval by the department when you're filling out the PAF for the unfunded agreement. Conversely, if you're a PI and your appointment is emeritus or emerita job code, then you are going to have to provide a justification and approval by the department.
So underlying this is a conversation that was had with academic HR about the job codes and which ones should have automatic PI eligibility versus which ones need additional approvals to ensure that they're meeting all of the requirements. And so we had some inconsistency in some of the Leo Glam job codes for the library archivist and curators. Between people who were, I believe, union employees versus not, or bargained for employees versus not. And so this change makes everyone consistent in how the restriction is or is not being applied. In this case, is not. For the emeritus emerita, that is actually a restriction that we have had published for a long-standing period, that they require additional approvals to ensure that they're meeting the criteria to be named a PI on a project. And so all we are doing here is ensuring that the system lines up with our stated process on the website.
Thank you. And now to my last slide. This is really an FYI. If you're in an award or an award change request and you go over to the mod ACR tab, this is combining the award docs or mod docs as well as information in this tab. So I've highlighted the in the red boxes the new items. So you have a link to the award documents. You can, from here, you can click back to the PAF that actually created the award. If there are mods or word change requests listed, the documents, and then the PAF that was added in that mod is also there, and that is a link. So hopefully it's more of a one place to go for other items you might need to learn more about the award. And that concludes my update. So I'm going to pass this on to Debbie Kelly for sponsored programs update.
Thanks, Carolyn. Next slide. So first off, I just want to say thank you to everyone for all the help in getting all of our reports completed during our busy season. Once again, we had great success. And if you go to the next slide, I can share that. So during the peak season, we had almost 2,400 reports that were needed to be completed by December 31st. And of that, we completed 98.56%. So a big round of applause to all of you for all the effort you put into helping us get all of those reports completed. We really appreciate it. And we know that it's a big effort on your part as well. So thank you so much for getting those done. Next slide, please. So this leads us right into almost spring. Here we are with miserable weather for the past week, but spring is right around the corner. So if you can go to the next slide, we are in need of your help again. So we have closeouts that we try to work on during this time when our workload goes down quite a bit. We're actually looking at getting as many closeouts completed in the next few months as possible. So we're hoping that if your school has a number of closeouts and you can work with us to partner with the reporting team, that would be really great. As you can see here, we have about 1,600 active closeouts and 600 of those are late. So we're really focusing on getting those the late closeouts done. So whatever you can do to help us get those completed, we really would appreciate it. Just one last thing, if you do have an interest in partnering with us for your school's closeouts, please feel free to reach out to Chris Becken on that. And on our audits, so the uniform guidance audit is so close to being done. It's like any minute it'll be completed. So we are working with PwCR auditors to get that wrapped up. It's actually due March 31st, but we're hoping it will be completed either today or tomorrow or sometime this week. And in there, we had a finding that is really an accounting type finding related to how we draw. And this is a finding that's commonplace now for other universities as well when we're on the accrual basis of accounting. If you really want to hear more about it, feel free to chat with me sometime. I'd be happy to explain it. The other two findings were related to some minor issues on our COVID funding, nothing that's of any significance. So we're really happy with those two findings, not so happy with that third one about the cash. But the next item, so equipment inventory. As you recall, in 2021, the university had an external company come out and do what they refer to as a baseline inventory. And with that, they were to follow up and come back, and they did last fall for another inventory of all the equipment. So they did that, they wrapped it up, and we still have a number of assets that are not accounted for. So property control is working with units, and maybe you've heard this from your facilities people, but they're looking to really locate all of the assets. And just as a reminder, we went through a process when they did the baseline inventory of making sure that we could identify all of the assets and account for them. And so the expectation is this time that we account for all of those assets that remain. So if you if someone reaches out to you directly, please help with locating those. What will happen once property control has really exhausted all of the resources they have available, then they'll be providing us with a list, and we'll work with the RAC member to help us locate all of those assets. And when I say locate, it could very well be that they are disposed of, but we need to have that properly accounted for as well. And the last thing that I wanted to share is some exciting news. So personnel updates, we have 4 new or returning accountants. They all started in January. So here you have Katie, David, Lee, Elliot, and Melissa. And Melissa was here a number of years ago, and we're excited that she has returned to sponsored programs into the university. So we're really happy to have all of them with us, and they are at the very end of their training. So and when I mean that to say is they're at the end of the course training that's pretty intense, and then they will be starting to get a number of reports, a small number, and go from there. So it's exciting to have some more people in our office, and I think with that, I will look to see if there's any questions, and I don't see any, so I'll pass this on to Andrea with the ORSP update.
Thanks, Debbie. Okay, so we've got actually quite a few big things to cover in our sponsor updates, but we'll start with my usual little highlight of a researcher throughout history who may be lesser known. So Marie Maynard Daly was the first Black woman to earn a PhD in chemistry in the United States, and actually the first Black woman to graduate from Columbia with a PhD. Dr. Daly made significant contributions to our understanding of how the diet affects health, and was the first to actually identify the relationship between cholesterol and clogged arteries. Next slide. Okay, we'll dive right in with that NSF item. So safe and inclusive working environments. Like I said, NSF announced that they are requiring these now. That requirement went into effect. It was announced in November, went into effect in January 30th. And NSF subsequently announced that they would be piloting a program with 2 directorates, bio and geo, to have those plans submitted as part of the proposal documents. And they would be considered when reviewing the proposals and determining funding. So in those two directorates only, we are requiring that the plan actually be uploaded as part of the proposal because it does have to be submitted to NSF. For other proposal opportunities, we would like to see them submitted into ERPM or uploaded into ERPM. In a future enhancement, we'll probably be looking at making it a required document anytime we see that there's going to be offsite work and the sponsor is NSF, but right now we aren't able to work that tricky bit of programming, so we are having a certification done, as Carolyn demonstrated earlier. We do have a template plan in place on our website for PIs to utilize when this plan is required as part of their proposal submission, either for the submission itself or just to have on file prior to submitting the proposal. We would really strongly encourage you to use our plan template to ensure that the plan that's developed is compliant with all of the requirements from NSF. They have some very specific requirements for what needs to be covered in each of these plans. The plan itself has a lot of information on different resources at the institution that can be leveraged by the PI for implementing their safe and inclusive work environment plans. So we would really encourage you to go out, take a look at that template and utilize it going forward whenever it is required for an NSF proposal. NIH data management and sharing policy also went into place January 25th. So that became effective and PIs have started including their data management and sharing plans in their proposal submissions to NIH. There are a lot of resources out there to help PIs with developing these plans. The DMP tool is highly recommended by the institution for use in creating a plan. And there's a lot of resources and information out on our website and on the Research Data Sharing Initiative website, which is a group here at U of M who helped get everything together so that we could be prepared and ready for this new process January 25th. There is new guidance from NIH about how to budget for these plans because NIH does allow costs associated with creating and completing these plans to be direct charged. The guidance essentially states that all of the costs, including personnel costs for your data management and sharing items, need to be put into one budget line, with the exception of subs, which if you have costs for your subs, that would be a line item within the sub budget. There's a whole bunch of information out on the NIH website, which we would encourage you to go take a look at if you're helping your PIs with budgeting for their data management and sharing plan. NIH also recently announced that they are going to be requiring implementation of a particular federal requirement or CFR that requires institutions receiving NIH funds have in place a behavioral code of conduct. We do have a number of policies that taken together constitute a code of conduct under the new regulation or the newly applied regulation. It was an existing regulation that was used for federal agencies previously and now kind of has been expanded in its use, I think. But the SPGs that we would refer to are listed here. They're also out on our website. This is an institutional requirement. It is not an individual application requirement. It's likely not something you are going to be directly asked about, but we wanted to share that we have looked at this and we feel we have compliant SPGs to fit this need, just in case, so that you can be comfortable the institution has covered this requirement. Couple of other NIH updates. The executive level salary or the salary cap has been raised to $212,100 effective January 1st, and the notice is surprisingly out already from NIH. Previous years, it's taken a couple of months past the actual implementation date, so they got it out pretty quickly this year. lots of information out on the website and in the wrap if you need further info. There are now revised formats for biosketches and current and pending other support for NSF. And this is consistent with the requirements in the updated PAPG. On the home front, next slide. So big new announcement. Chandra White will be joining our office, taking Craig's old position. She will now be our new AVP. She starts April 10th. So we've got a little over a month to go before she joins us. But she comes to us with a wealth of experience and knowledge. She's currently at Northwestern. She has 15 years of leadership experience in sponsored research, and is the AVP in her current position. So she will be coming and joining our office soon, and we're really excited to have her join. We have a couple of other new staff announcements, no pictures yet, but Taylor Wynn on our private sponsors team and Sarah Sanders on our government sponsors team. 2 new team members, 2 new PRs joining ORSP, and we also have a couple of departures and a couple of vacancies to announce. So Manny Pierce recently accepted a position at Cornell and has departed our institution for a growth opportunity, and we are very proud of him and his career growth. We were sad to see him go, but he has departed, and so we are recruiting to fill his position currently, and actually I think are in the process of making some an offer right now. Tony Nielsen also retired after I think more than a decade of service in our office. He retired at the beginning of February. And so we are in the process of recruiting to fill his assistant manager position as well. So all in all, we have actually 3 project representative positions open in our office. 2 of those are brand new positions. So they're additive staff to the office, which we are really excited about. And 1 is the replacement for Manny's departure. And we also have a support staff position that, if not already posted, will be posted soon, as Julie Swisher has accepted an opportunity out on campus that we are so happy for her to have, also a growth opportunity, but we will be hiring to replace her soon. Just a note, you've probably seen a ton of communications about this, but the OVPR awards are out and accepting nominations that are due with today as the final day. So hopefully you've already worked on that and are getting it in, but we wanted to highlight it since today is the final day for getting those applications or nominations in. We also just wanted to make a quick note about the Incura webinar resource that we have out on our website. The Office of Research and Sponsored Projects does fund purchase of many of the webinars that Incura and some of our other professional organizations put out. Whenever we are able to share them campus-wide, we do download those videos and put them out on our secured website. You have to have your unique ID and password login to get in and see these resources, because they do need to be limited to access within the institution based on the rights that we've paid for use for those. But ORSP makes that available to campus as a resource. And just a quick note on congressional districts. So those recently changed with the most recent census and the loss of one of the seats in Michigan. Our districts were revised, and so those have been updated, I believe, in ERPM. But just for your awareness, if you're filling out paperwork for non-system to system submissions, our new congressional districts are here for all 3 of the campuses. Also a quick note, there are still ongoing trainings and workshops available from the Research Data Stewardship Initiative that is assisting with implementation of the NIH data management and sharing policy. So please do register for those if you're interested. And that's it.
Great, thanks, Andrea. And as you're all absorbing all of these details and information, we hope that you're thinking about your next research administration chapter. So for those of you who are ready to take the exam and want to join the study program, it was posted earlier, the next cohort for AIM Higher is accepting applications through the end of this week. The first intro session starts on Friday. If that time frame doesn't work for you, you can expect to hear later in the summer for applications for the fall study group. Again, this is a great program and it is geared toward adult learners. We've included some handouts for you today, and Chris will share those a bit later, and Kathy, and on the body of knowledge and the CRA handbook to get you started. We'll also share links to the AIM Higher study group. If you're already certified and wondering about professional development activities and research activities, I would first encourage you to consult the How to Earn Contact Hours on the RAC CRA website. And that's the RAC External Organization CRA website, and to watch for opportunities both on campus with NCURA, SRA, and you can certainly volunteer to be a moderator for a future study session. If you're new to research administration, keep the CRA in mind. There's lots of opportunities on campus to start a good, solid foundation in research administration, and we encourage you to take advantage of these activities, participate in trainings, webinars, and network sessions as they become available. Lastly, I would encourage you to get a CRA mentor if you don't have one. There are plenty of CRAs willing to share their experience and help guide you through the process. I worked with a CRA mentor while I studied for the exam, and even as I explored my recertification opportunities, I engaged with a mentor as well. And I also engaged with a mentor for other professional development activities, even after I got recertified. So good luck on your next RA chapter. And with that, I'll turn it over to Kathy. Thank you.
Thank you, Danielle. Now, as we begin to close out our time together, we have a short poll about your overall experience in today's RAND meeting. And we'd like to know how relevant you found the meeting in terms of the content on a 5-point scale. 1 is not relevant, 2 slightly relevant, 3 moderately relevant, 4 relevant, and 5 highly relevant. So if you could take just a quick moment and respond to the second poll, we'd appreciate it. I'm hoping that we've opened the door and made the CRA certification process less daunting and more interesting. So looks like we're almost done with the poll. And thank you for everybody for participating in the poll, because this always helps us judge where we're going next with content. So we've got 73%. I think that's good. Okay, I think we're on to our last slide. Thank you. We want to extend our thanks today and our appreciation to our MC, our panelists and presenters, and to each of you for being with us. I would also like to thank the Communications Subcommittee for all their work to produce, host, and support each RAND meeting. There's a lot that goes on to make this work, and it never amazes me how much it really does take a village. I want to invite you to please stay in touch on the forum on Slack and come to our virtual networking sessions. They've been really wonderful. And as always, if you have any ideas, suggestions, or other feedback, please let us know at ranplans@umich.edu. That's RAN-plans@umich.edu. And last, save the date. Next RAND meeting is Wednesday, May 17th. Take care and be well. Thank you.